Absolutely shocking news hit the college football world yesterday when Nick Saban announced that he would be retiring as the head coach of Alabama. I can't quite put into words what he's meant to this sport, but I'm going to talk about him for a minute, and then I'm going to talk about how this could impact the Florida Gators. Okay, Nick Saban changed the SEC and then changed college football, right? And I think that, most of us really talk about and remember the things that he did at Alabama. But I think it is important to talk about the stuff that he did at LSU first because he won a championship there. Before leaving for the Miami Dolphins, he created a team that Les Miles would go on to win a national championship with. His handprints have been all over this conference for a really long time. He came to Alabama in 2007, and 2007 was right at the start of a really good time for Florida Gator football. We had Urban Meyer, we had just won the 2006 national championship, and it looked like we were going to continue to roll. Obviously, 2007 was a rougher year for Florida than the previous year or the next year would be. But 2008, two Titans square off in the SEC championship game. That 2008 Florida Gator team is still the only team that has ever beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. Think about that for a minute and how crazy that is. 2008. We are talking about 16 years ago. That's insane. Alabama became what everybody else was chasing, the powerhouse. Nick Saban built that. And, I think simultaneously he built that, but he also kind of destroyed what Florida and Urban Meyer were building. 2009 was Florida's opportunity to run it back. They wanted 2 in a row. 3 in 4 years. They had the team to be able to do it. They run into Alabama in the SEC championship game and got dominated. And, I know what Gator fans will say. I know that we will say it matters that Carlos Dunlap didn't play in that game because he'd gotten a DUI the week before. It matters that Percy Harvin wasn't healthy. There are definitely aspects of that game that are different based on what Florida had currently going on in its roster, but that's not an excuse. Alabama dominated. That was a fun game for me personally. My cousin caught the winning touchdown for Alabama, so I was sad that Florida lost, but excited for him. But that, in retrospect, was the beginning of the end for the University of Florida. We never have gotten higher than that moment since then, since 2008. And that was kind of Nick Saban's doing, right? And he created this program that everybody else wanted to be like. I think Georgia is built the way that they're built because Alabama gave them the blueprint. I think that a lot of how Clemson is built is because Alabama gave them the blueprint. He has become what everybody else strives to be. Even when Urban Meyer went to Ohio State, there's reports that he would say things like, Alabama got a waterfall in their locker room. We need one too. Nick Saban does blah, 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 blah at Alabama. We need that too. He is the standard for college football. And, I think this season, when Alabama struggled against USF in the beginning, there was some rumblings that maybe his heart's not in it anymore. Maybe he's going to retire. And then we watched what I think is arguably Nick Saban's best coaching job of his career. He took an underperforming team, a team that wasn't looking very good at the beginning of the season, and got him to the SEC championship game where they beat Georgia, who had won 28 straight back-to-back national champions, beats them in the SEC conference game and makes the playoffs. He overachieved. And I know that's such a weird concept when you're talking about a team that, was incredible this season, but they overachieved. This was not one of Nick Saban's most talented teams, but it was one of his best coaching jobs. So I think all of us were a little caught off guard when he announced yesterday that he was retiring. It's my understanding that there are some medical issues in his family that may need to be gotten taken care of. It's my understanding that maybe there's some other, factors influencing this, but Congratulations on a career. I mean, wow. He is the best coach that has ever coached college football. And argue with me if you disagree, but I'm telling you what, the best. So where does that leave Florida? I really think that there's a great opportunity here for Billy Napier and his staff to get some Alabama guys out of the portal. Now, let me explain a little bit about how this works, at least from my understanding. Because Alabama's head coach is leaving, those players will have 30 days to enter their name into the transfer portal. So even though the window had been closed, it is open for them. Recruits that have signed, I believe, can just ask for their release as opposed to entering the portal. Now, if Alabama were to not give it to them, they could portal at that point, but generally schools honor the request for release from their new guys. That gives Florida some opportunities here. First of all, Alabama has an incredibly talented roster. So if there are guys looking to jump ship, almost anybody could make Florida a better team. Florida is looking for offensive linemen. They are looking for an edge player. They're looking for a wide receiver. They are looking for a DB or two. Alabama is going to have all of that in spades. So something to pay really close attention to. And as far as recruits go, think about somebody like Jameer Grimsley. He is from Tampa. Obviously, that's much closer to the University of Florida. It's our understanding that really Florida came on very strong at the end in his commitment, even though Grimsley has been committed to Alabama since July. The week before early signing day, Florida was really in his ear. And, from the quotes that we've seen from Grimsley prior to signing, he said knowing Nick Saban will be the head coach of Alabama was the difference maker for them. Well, he is not the head coach of Alabama anymore. So if Florida was incredibly appealing to him before, it's got to be even more appealing now. And somebody like Grimsley really helps this 2024 class. Also think about Mincy from Daytona Beach mainland, another guy that it really went down to the wire with. His teammate LJ McCray is already a Gator. Florida is somebody he gave a ton of consideration to. Much closer to home, familiarity with guys on the team. You've got to think that this is giving him pause as well. And again, another guy that if it was really down to the wire, Florida should have a great opportunity to maybe get him to come over to the orange and blue. So I think that those are real possibilities. And we are going to see what Billy Napier and staff are made of right now. You were just gifted a golden opportunity to raid the coffers of arguably the best program in college football. What do you do with that opportunity? And, for whatever reason, Florida has moved a little bit slow in the transfer portal. So they have spots. They signed a high school class during the early signing day that is smaller than normal. They've got spots there. So this due diligence that, we get on here and we complain about because it takes longer than the rest of the college football world could pay off for Billy Napier because those spots are available. If you hurry up, pick up that phone and jump now. Now, as far as Alabama goes, I find it incredibly hard to believe that they don't already know who they're hiring. I would almost guarantee that the next person was decided. Nick Saban signed off on it. Everybody knew who it was agreed in principle prior to that statement going out yesterday. So if that's the case, I expect in the next 48 hours or so, we hear who the next head coach is, which means there's going to be a very small window of time for these guys to, get inundated from these other programs, because the next coach is going to come in and sell them hard on why they need to stay at Alabama. They've got a ready-made championship team. This next guy is just as good and he can help them get to the promised land. So the window is small. It's going to require Coach Napier and company to move quickly. Be really interested to see who that next head coach is, though. In my opinion, it's Dan Lanning, essentially until it isn't, right? I think that there's been reports that he was in Tuscaloosa. The odds are in his favor. This is a name that's been thrown around a lot, but it's not the only name. For a very long time, Dabo Swinney was thought to be the shoo-in to replace Nick Saban. He still has the second best odds to become the coach at Alabama, but I think after the last year or two and Dabo's public comments about not liking NIL and the transfer portal and things like that potentially hurt his chances there, because Alabama wants to do whatever it takes to win. And I don't know that they want to bring in somebody who's opposed to the new way of college football. Lane Kiffin has the third best odds. In my opinion, this is not a great fit. I don't know that I think you go from like the militaristic style of Nick Saban to the loosey-goosiness of Lane Kiffin. That, I don't know. That just seems not fitting to me. Kalen DeBoer is another hot name. Deion Sanders, of course, is going to continue to get mentioned anytime these jobs come up because he's hot right now. He's on everybody's tongue. I don't know that I think that's a fit at Alabama either. Urban Meyer, we had Meyer on this show. He told me point blank he would never coach college football again. So I find that one very, very hard to believe. Our very own Billy Napier has odds to become the Alabama head coach, which is incredibly interesting too. Obviously, that comes from the fact that he worked under Saban. They have a relationship there. I don't in any way expect that to happen. And the reality is, I don't know that there's a single coach in college football that wouldn't jump at the opportunity to coach at Alabama. It is one of the, let's say, top 3 jobs in the country. It has a roster that, if you can keep them together, is ready-made to win a championship. I would say Kirby is probably the only person not interested. I mean, Sarkisian's a name that's being thrown around, and I think that makes sense because he worked under Saban. Texas has, oil money, so maybe it gets into a bidding war, and that's the only reason he stays at Texas. But this team is not a rebuild. It's reloaded, it's locked, it's ready to go as long as you can convince the roster to stay there. Any name that they're talking about is going to do a pretty good job convincing these guys to stay home. So, I can't imagine really anybody outside of Kirby turning this job down. Well, at the end of the day, I don't even think we know the impact that this is going to have on the sport in general, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens for Florida specifically. And maybe very little, but I think there's an opportunity to get better here. I'm interested to see the domino effect throughout college football, because when Alabama hires their head coach, it'll be somebody else's head coach. Again, more than likely Dan Lanning at Oregon, but then Oregon's players get 30 days to decide if they're getting into the transfer portal. And that will continue as long as the next guy hired is a head coach. Now, at some point, somebody's going to hire a coordinator, something like that, and then the buck stops there. That team doesn't have the opportunity to hit the transfer portal. But depending on how long this goes on, it could be interesting for a very long time. I hope Coach Napier and staff are on the phones right now. Let's get better today. Either way, we're going to be here to tell you about it. It's going to be interesting to watch. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're tuned in, because I'm sure this won't be the last video we do on this. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, go Gators.